Credits. Death to the Fascist Insect. Edited by Genova Jet. 1. Introduction. The so-called symbionese Liberation Army rose into world renown on the basis of two crimes. In the communities which surround San Francisco Bay, neither of the crimes was very atrocious, or even very uncommon. The region manages to accept many hundreds of murders every year, plus tens of thousands of rapes, mutilations, beatings, armed robberies, and non-fatal knifings and shootings. Moreover, the characteristic crime of violence in the Bay Area is social, or racial, in that it typically involves a black as the criminal and a white as the victim. Unless the details are particularly scabrous, such crimes are given only a few column inches in back pages of newspapers, and not even reported on the electronic news media. Mere murder is not news. When the crime is especially appalling, and gets wider notice, it commands headlines for only a few days. Typical instances of this heavy but brief notoriety were grouped all around the crimes that made the Symbionese Liberation Army a name to conjure with. Thus, on the evening of January 28, 4 whites were shot down on San Francisco streets in a coordinated symbolic act by 4 young blacks. In the night of January 30, 3 whites were slashed to death by a young black already under sentence for crimes of violence. On the afternoon of February 7, 2 young career policemen were murdered by a black gunman in an Oakland school building. Not one of these killings enjoyed more than a few days of press coverage, not one was regarded as philosophically or socially significant. The fact that murder, even socially adjusted murder, is among the Bay Area norms, gives special interest to the marvelous success of the slaw in getting and keeping its audience. Never before has so little crime bought so much fame. The triumph of the symbionese in this respect developed from a set of isolated potentials cleverly put together by slaw theoreticians, and thoroughly recorded in their letters and other documents. In these writings the slaw provided something for every appetite. In killing the loved and admired black educator, Marcus Foster, and killing him on the maxim that he was a traitor to his race, they elicited not only horror, but widespread discussion and challenge. In kidnapping Patricia Hearst, a pretty young heiress, and holding her hostage in some unimaginably secret headquarters, they added responses of sex, sentiment, and class, to those of caste and race. These crimes alone, once admitted or claimed, would have brought them into the limelight for a week or two, especially in the excitable communities around the Bay. But by their literary programs the slaw writers carried their renown much farther. Delivered one by one, carefully, to the media, the slaw documents forced the constitutional and philosophical identity of the slaw into the consciousness of thoughtful people, and successfully presented the slaw soldiers as friends and benefactors to thousands or tens of thousands of such Bay Area people as managed to believe that good things can be had for nothing. Here as elsewhere, the slaw got much result from little input. Even if the Hearst food program had proceeded at the grandiose level in which the slaw first envisaged it, the costs it would have involved would not have equaled the sums spent in a single day for the regular social and welfare operations in California. But the food program completed the slaw publicity program, adding the curiosity and admiration of people who could be reached by no other means. If earlier deeds and words had earned the attention of intellectuals, sensation hunters, and responsible citizens, the new deed with free food added the attention of the dispirited, calloused, and cynical. Thus the whole society, from top to bottom, was drawn in. The most important of the beliefs that swept through the articulate circles of the Bay Area was the belief that the terrorist formulas actually worked, that they produced quick and useful results, and that society and its laws had no way of countering them. And this amounted to a belief in terror itself as a mode of politics. Thus the symbionese had an early success beyond their wildest dreams. They silenced the voices of responsible people, they thwarted the press, and for whatever reasons, they successfully postponed police and legal action. Although they repelled most of the organizations on which they had called for support, they got active support from many black organizations, and got the sympathy and appreciation of many people, the recipients of food, mostly but by no means entirely black. If the slaw soldiers affected the course of society on its economic or political sides, they did so by awakening the counterforces of reaction and repression which they ostensibly hated and fought against. But in the final analysis, the symbionese demonstrated the fragility of our leadership, the weakness of our media, and the softness and confusion of our social self-image. Not through their two crimes, neither of which was unusual and neither of which could have been unexpected, but through their program as registered through their screeds, they had paralyzed the law and courts, shocked and distorted public opinion, performed the greatest feat of showmanship since the rise of Hitler in Germany, and earned the guerdon of a great place in the attention of our worldwide Western culture, as well as their little place in its history. History shows that many men and women have died for less. 2 Case history. It's a hold up. Down on the floor. On your faces, you motherfuckers. At this point, you would almost expect the frame to freeze, and the sounds of Dick Dale's ear-splitting surf guitar to fill the theater. But no, this wasn't the beginning of some Quentin Tarantino crime film. It was, however, a queer turn of events, and certainly one which usually only gets depicted in the improbable action films which Hollywood is so adept at churning out. As grim luck would have it, it was tax day. April 15, 1974. At 9:40 a.m., the customers were going about their usual business at the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco's Sunset District, when 4 white women and a black man walked through the doors and began raising hell. Within 4 minutes, they had wounded 2 bystanders, and fled in a getaway car with over $10,000 in cash. What was looking to be an all-too routine bank hold-up soon went into overdrive as the police, reviewing the bank's videotape surveillance footage, recognized the face of one of the carbine-wielding assailants as that of a young woman who had been missing for over 2 months, Patricia Campbell Hearst. Granddaughter of the powerful and much-feared newspaper publisher William Randolph Hearst, who provided the obvious inspiration for the titular character in Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. Much to William Randolph's anger, Patricia Campbell Hearst had been kidnapped at gunpoint from her Berkeley apartment on February 4, by 2 black men and a white woman. Her fiancé Stephen Weed had been brutally beaten during the act. The fact that Hearst was not known for her roles in campus activism, this being one of the greatest periods for student unrest, led police to believe that the abduction was an extortion attempt, but the perpetrators quickly identified themselves to the authorities as members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA. Even as a few enterprising reporters began to turn up the basic data on the SLA membership, a new set of crimes began to occupy the headlines. These were the zebra killings, a new program of so-called senseless slayings or random murders of whites by blacks on the streets of San Francisco and other cities. Attacks in this racially specialized series soon totaled 18, and 12 of the San Francisco victims had been killed outright. Some victims were shot, others hacked to pieces with machetes. The San Francisco Police Department, which had already mounted a massive operation to stop these killings, now adopted the technique of accosting and questioning young blacks who answered descriptions of the killers. There was an immediate protest from black politicians and other race leaders. Court injunctions, emergency meetings, riotous protests staged for the cameras, and all the rest of the race politics furor now filled the media. Quite by accident, the series of black-white murders acquired its poetic code name Zebra. While the SLA lay quiet, their own beast, the Cobra, slipped to the back pages, while the zebra of the bloodier new episode dominated the emotions of the Bay Area peoples. The next move by the SLA, namely the robbery of the Hibernia Bank, took place after this shift of racial attention from Cobra to Zebra. A communique from Sync shortly afterwards attributed Operation Zebra to a white conspiracy to allow black males to be arrested. On Friday and Saturday, May 3 and 4, media focus once more shifted to the zebra killings. These were now established as the work of a cult of young blacks calling themselves Death Angels and having links to the Nation of Islam. Several cult killer suspects were arrested and an inevitable outburst of anti-police protests and civil rights lawsuits instantly erupted. The self-appointed leader of the SLA, Donald DeFries, dubbed himself Field Marshal Sanctum. Accepting nothing less than total loyalty and obedience from his followers. 1. De Vrees's aim was to start a revolution of the underprivileged, a feat which he intended to ignite by declaring war on those with status and money. To procure their weapons, the SLA had burglarized houses belonging to prominent Bay Area leftists. Despite ignorance on the part of the larger radical community, the SLA went about establishing their army. De Vries drew up an outline of the SLA's planned structure. They exercised themselves into peak physical condition, and like the best soldiers learned how to break down and load their weapons whilst blindfolded. Their socialist philosophy was aimed at quashing racism, sexism, ageism, capitalism, fascism, individualism, possessiveness, competitiveness, and all other institutions that have made and sustained capitalism. Because they were small in numbers, they wanted their debut actions to be forceful and daring, to shock the world into taking notice of them. Amongst their early plans to be abandoned was a plot to bomb Avis Rent-A-Car headquarters, and the assassination of Raymond Precunier, director of the California Department of Corrections. This was scrapped due to the fear of severe repercussions on prison inmates. In their search of the Information Unit headquarters in Concord, police found sketches of plans to kill and kidnap selected business executives residing in the Bay Area. Declarations of war had been drafted against the companies which employed these men, the usual grounds being that the companies sold their goods in Rhodesia and South Africa. Among the other records assembled by the Information Unit, but not understood till later, were the name of Stephen Weed and the address and telephone number of the deluxe townhouse apartment which he shared with Patricia Hearst. Weed, a graduate student in philosophy, had been Patricia Hearst's mathematics teacher at a private school on the San Francisco Peninsula. They had lived together for 2 years. Miss Hearst, as a woman dwelling on a quiet street in a familiar neighborhood, seemed a more simple target to the Berkeley-oriented SLA. She was also a more profitable target. Though she had led an active, even reckless, kind of life, she would register to the public in the familiar double pattern of child victim and beauty in distress. From the SLA point of view, her political ambience made her still more attractive. She belonged to the 4th generation of the most distinguished of California dynasties. Her father, Randolph Hearst, had his modest million or so, but also had some access to dozens or scores of millions in the Hearst Foundation and Hearst Corporation. By an even luckier chance, her mother was a member of the Board of Regents which controls operations of the University of California. For many years the Board of Regents had been under violent attack by Berkeley radical and left-wing forces on such matters as government-supported research, People's Park development, and student fees. The most recent of the continuing battles against the Regents came from the fact that some university monies were invested in American firms which traded with such no-no nations as South Africa, Portugal, and, unbelievably, Great Britain. The fact that the Hearsts were a newspaper family, with large interests in other media as well, made a grand addition to Patricia Hearst's eligibility as a victim of the SLA. In the fall of 1973 the Weed Hearst apartment was looked at by members of FASA's SLA Information Unit. On February 2, 1974, a racially mixed SLA team attempted to enter it on a ruse. In the evening of February 4, another racially mixed team, 1 white girl and 2 Negro men, got the door opened with a story about an automobile accident, thrust Stephen Weed back into the apartment, and chased the screaming Patricia Hearst from room to room. Weed's hands were tied and he was beaten with a wine bottle. A neighbor, Stephen Swinaga, rushed in to offer aid, and was clubbed down and left for dead. Weed freed his hands, ran out the back door, and hurried through 4 back gardens and over 3 fences before stopping in the safety of another street. After his escape, Patricia Hearst, clothed only in a nightgown, was hustled out of the apartment. A little armada of 3 cars, a Volkswagen Bug, an old Chevrolet station wagon, and a stolen convertible, had been assembled there by the SLA, and Miss Hearst was thrown bodily into the trunk of the convertible. Some of the 6 or 7 SLA members had begun shooting by then, and the 3 vehicles disappeared with the revolutionary guns still blazing. According to her account, Patty Hearst was kept blindfolded in a closet at the SLA's headquarters for over 2 months, deprived of even being able to use the toilet in privacy. De Vries hoped that Hearst's profile, as well as the enormous amount of publicity which her kidnapping had generated, would help to highlight his causes, particularly if Hearst herself was to come out in support of the SLA. To achieve this, De Vries employed, according to Hearst, a program of degrading psychological treatments, which included Hearst being physically and sexually abused by various members of the SLA, forced to record phone messages in which she criticized those close to her, made to feel as if no one was interested in rescuing her, fed lies about the group's repression by the establishment, and constantly told that she will probably die. Within 2 months of the kidnapping, Patty Hearst's defection to the SLA was seemingly complete. After being given the new name of Tanya, she was ready to accompany her kidnappers on their next display of public daring. Although Patty's father, Randolph Hearst, initially gave in to the SLA's demands for millions of dollars worth of food to be distributed to the poor, the scheme backfired when hoodlums made off with large portions of the food, distribution trucks were stormed by rock-throwing street mobs, and the majority of people who truly needed the food complained that they had received either none or very little. There were also accusations that other local, unknown radical and left-wing groups were stealing the food to resell at high prices. Hearst also went along with the SLA's demands for their propaganda to be published, but negotiations abruptly ceased when Hearst demanded the safe return of Patty before he would agree to any of their further demands. The SLA claimed that Hearst was being kept in protective custody after her arrest. In the following weeks, the SLA released several tapes containing voice messages from Patty, the tones of which hinted towards a gradual conversion to the SLA's cause. The belief that she was being coerced into saying these things took a severe denting when the SLA released a photo of Patty in full military regalia, clutching a carbine rifle whilst posing next to a large painting of the Naga, a 7-headed cobra which the SLA had adopted as their symbol. Presented in Swahili, Spanish, and English, the 7 heads of the Naga represented the 7 principles of the SLA. The principles are almost identical to the 7 points of the Black nationalist creed of Kwanzaa, although the text used to explain each point was developed by the SLA. On a subsequent tape recording, she revealed that she had adopted the new name of Tanya, after Haiti Tamara Bunkbider, an Argentinian woman who became the girlfriend of Che Guevara, adopting the alias of Tanya when she went underground as a guerrilla in Che's army. She was shot dead by the Bolivian army in 1967, and had made it quite clear that she had joined the cause. To her family, it all seemed so totally out of character. It was not long after the arrival of the photograph that Patty was captured on video partaking in the Hibernia bank robbery, and when the Attorney General declared that she had been a willing participant, a warrant was issued for her arrest as a material witness, although police quickly began treating her as something a lot more serious. San Francisco in the early 1970s was a veritable hotbed of political activism and extremist groups, most of whom saw the peaceful demonstration movement of the 1960s as flaccid and ineffectual, favoring a more radical and violent modus operandi as a way to get their voices heard. The SLA first let their presence widely known 4 months prior to the Hearst kidnapping, when they claimed responsibility for the assassination of school superintendent Marcus Foster, who was cut down by cyanide-laced bullets in Oakland on Election Day, November 6, 1973. In their letters claiming responsibility for the killing, the SLA also declared war on fascism by trying to stop the compulsory issuing of student photo ID.D.S, which were designed, at least according to the government, to protect students from black drug dealers. 3. Dr. Marcus Foster, superintendent of the Oakland school system, a black man widely honored and admired, had come to California from a distinguished earlier career in the East. His chief assistant, Robert Blackburn, a white, had also served in other systems, and had spent some years in a federal program organizing schools in Africa. Both had become involved in discussions about violence and murder in Oakland schools. During the autumn of 1973, 2 particular suggestions, namely that police protection be given to teachers and students in schools, and that a system of voluntary identification be used to keep street kids and petty criminals off school grounds, had been mooted in board meetings. These measures had become issues of great importance to the black communities in the East Bay. They were called discriminatory and anti-black, and board meetings at which they were discussed were generally violent. Foster and Blackburn supported only the second of the measures, and even then only half-heartedly, but they failed to take the extreme positions demanded of them by black radicals. The moderation of these two men led to their being sentenced to death, execution by cyanide bullets, by the SLA. On November 6, election night throughout the USA, the hit took place. As they walked from a school board meeting to Blackburn's parked car, they were cut down by small arms fire. Blackburn's wounds were from a shotgun, and after some time on the critical list he recovered from them. Foster was struck by 8 pistol bullets, and died instantly. Although this shooting occurred in series with a large number of other killings in the Bay Area, Dr. Foster's civic importance, wide public standing, and negritude made the murder a sensation throughout California and the nation in general. Following the arrest on January 10 of 2 soldiers from the SLA, who were later charged in connection with the Foster killing, one was eventually released. The authorities slowly began to learn more about this new renegade terrorist group. Most of this information was pieced together from both the 2 incarcerated SLA members, as well as propaganda, slogans, and notes which the police discovered in a safe house that had been abandoned by the group. Symbionese, it emerged, was a derivative of the biological term symbiosis, used to describe different organisms that live together in apparent synchronization, or harmony. The SLA symbol, the 7-headed cobra, was a representation of the 7 principles of God and life. It was also discovered that DeFries was a 31-year-old African American, an ex-con with a record of petty crimes. His adoptive name, Sink, came from a slave ship to America, who had taken over the ship and then subsequently used it to make further slave runs. Although DeFries was portrayed as the SLA's leader, many believe the reins of the organization were actually pulled by a lesbian named Ms. Moonsolti Seek, which could account for the strong female influence which ran throughout the group. Of the 11 members of the SLA, 5 were female. In January of 1973, former topless blackjack dealer Nancy Ling Perry, aka Faiza, inhabited a tract house at 1560 Sutherland Court in the dull East Bay town of Concord, near Berkeley. Russell Little, Joseph Remiro, and perhaps others, lived there with her. On January 10, Little and Remiro, driving near the house in a panel truck registered to Perry, were stopped by traffic patrolmen and elected to shoot it out with them rather than show their identification. Both were captured on the spot, uninjured. A few minutes later, neighbors of the house discovered it to be ablaze. Firemen and police who responded to the alarm discovered a cache of SLA literature, several maps and charts connected with the death of Marcus Foster, a couple of bombs, assorted small arms and ammunition, and cyanide of the kind used to make the SLA's signature bullets. Perry, with 3 colleagues, had driven away at breakneck speed just before the fire was discovered. Within 48 hours of the Hibernia Bank holdup, another tape from the SLA was delivered into the hands of Rodney Williams, a black police officer. As he pressed play, the enraged voice of Patty Tanya Hearst filled the room, spewing venom and claiming that her gun was loaded and ready to go during the robbery. She also added that their actions were a justifiable means to finance the revolution, and reiterated that at no time was she forced to participate in the hold-up. As for being brainwashed, the idea is ridiculous to the point of being beyond belief. I am a soldier of the People's Army. Despite this, some authorities, as well as Patty's parents, continued to believe that her involvement was insincere. Patty's background was one of strict conservatism. She enjoyed life in an expensive apartment that was financed by her parents, looked down upon the hippies and counterculture youth, and had even split up with her first boyfriend after she discovered he smoked pot. A further indication of Patty's seeming allegiance to the SLA occurred when she fired a series of warning shots above the head of a Los Angeles sporting goods store owner. Hearst had been stationed as a watch while fellow members Bill Harris and Emily Yolanda Harris went in to rob the store. The store owner and an employee had tried to apprehend the pair, but only just managed to avoid getting their heads blown off by the bullets from Hurst's gun. "Let them go, you motherfuckers, or you're all dead," Hurst screamed, before she and the Harrises took off in the van, embarking on a carjacking spree to avoid capture. The driver of one car which the trio hijacked was to claim that Patty appeared to be very much a willing part of the drama. In late April 1974, a fragment of the SLA moved out of their small apartment at 1827 Golden Gate Avenue in the Western Addition, Oregon Wapak area of San Francisco. The apartment had been rented in mid-March by a white girl who gave her name as Louise Hamilton. The small apartment house, the street, and the surrounding neighborhood were all racially mixed, so that neighbors paid no attention when a black man moved in with her. Ultimately 4 people, that is Marshall Sink and 3 of the white girls, lived there. Tanya Hurst had spent at least part of April there. The fact that she had gone out alone to buy groceries seemed to prove that she was not under duress, much less in captivity. Contrary to the injunctions of their codes of war, Screed 23, the SLA soldiers had been terrible housekeepers. It was the cockroaches which flowed out into neighboring apartments which caused the manager to investigate and thus to discover who his tenants had been. He found the place filthy, battered, and stinking. Police and reporters alike, when they finally arrived, were amazed by the indescribable filth and overpowering stench of the little headquarters. Besides odor, dirty underclothes, junk hardware, sleeping bags, and an old bicycle, police found the bathtub full of an evil-smelling concoction of household chemicals. The apartment boasted no fireplace, and the chemicals had been used to melt away papers and letters belonging to the group. At the bottom of the tub were several keys, including the ignition key of one of the rented cars used in the bank robbery. On May 17, 1974, 2 months after the bank job, a fierce, 2-hour gun battle erupted between the SLA and the LA police outside their East 54th Street hideout in the tough Los Angeles suburb of Watts. Authorities had been led to the location after police had found a parking ticket issued to the address in the back of Emily Harris's abandoned VW van. Having received a tip-off that the raid was about to come down, television cameras descended upon the area along with 500 cops, and the drama unfolded live in front of millions of viewers, in a grim foreshadowing of more recent reality dramas such as Waco and the O.J. Simpson highway chase. The torrid combat, in which over 9,000 rounds of ammunition were exchanged, eventually ignited a fire inside the SLA's hideout. In the ensuing confusion, 3 members of the group were shot dead as they tried to escape both the fire and the tear gas which had been fired into the house. 2 succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning, and DeFries chose to shoot himself in the head rather than face capture. The dead were later identified as DeFries, Nancy Ling Perry, Angela Atwood, Willie Cujo Wolf, Patricia Solty-Seek, and Camilla Hall. The raid effectively wiped out the SLA, but as Americans looked uncertain that Patty Hearst would be discovered among the dead, she had, along with Bill and Emily Harris, managed to avoid the shootout. They were watching the drama unfold from the window of a hotel in nearby Anaheim, and soon had sent police another tape in which she expressed her anger and horror over the killings, and spoke of her love for slain member Wolf, which some people theorized was a reason behind her apparent allegiance to the SLA. "I died in the fire on 54th Street, but out of the ashes I was reborn. I know what I have to do to continue the struggle," the shattered remnants of the SLA set about attracting sympathizers and new recruits, chief amongst which was a woman named Kathleen Soliafor. Patty Hearst was eventually tracked down and arrested by the FBI in September of 1975, 18 months after her kidnapping. Charged with bank robbery, her family were quick to hire famous celebrity lawyer F. Lee Bailey V to come to Patty's defense. Extremely media savvy, one of Bailey's stipulations for accepting the case was that he be given the book rights to the story, and that Patty herself could not publish her own autobiography for at least 18 months after the publication of his. During the media circus trial which followed, Patty recounted vivid descriptions of being abused and endlessly subjected to the SLA's rants and ideologies. Bailey used psychiatric experts to detail to the jury brainwashing techniques which he claimed the slaw had utilized on his clients. While Patty's trial was in session, Kathleen Solia was indicted in absentia for conspiracy to commit murder with explosives. Her brother Stephen, arrested with Patty, also went on trial. Solia herself changed her name and went into hiding after failed attempt to allegedly bomb a police car. The trial, a madhouse to begin with, took on an even more bizarre turn when the presiding judge, Oliver Carter, falsely claimed to have known Patty Hearst since the age of 5, and made the unprecedented move of granting interviews to publications like New York Times and Life. Hearst felt that Carter's comments and behavior were both unethical and potentially misleading to a jury, particularly his insinuation that the Hearst fortune would not be able to buy Patricia freedom, although her request for Carter to be replaced was ignored by Bailey. Beginning on February 4, 1976, 2 years to the day that Patty had been kidnapped, the trial was over in a rather hasty 39 days, certainly a short trial for a case involving a celebrity. Prosecuting was the U.S. Attorney for Northern California, James Browning, who was trying his first case in 7 years. The trial went bad for Hearst from the opening. Although several experts testified that Patty's IQ had dropped in the period since the robbery, and believed that she had been brainwashed into accepting the slaw's political agenda, they were apparently less than convincing, and the prosecution brought in their own expert, Dr. Joel Ford, who claimed that Patty was a willing participant, and described her as a rebel looking for a cause. Patty also hurt herself by refusing to testify against the other captured members of the slaw. Bill and Emily Harris also gave several media interviews that reiterated the fact that Hearst was not just a willing but a staunch supporter of the group. Hearst's case seemed well and truly sunk by Bailey's closing argument, which was rambling and frequently incoherent, with Bailey clutching his notes with trembling hands, his face flushed with the look of a man harboring a severe hangover. When Bailey spilled a glass of water over his crotch, it looked as if he had pissed his pants. It was, to say the least, distracting, Patty would later write in her memoirs, adding how the jury could be seen openly giggling at him. On March 20, after a 12-hour deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. Patty Hearst received the maximum sentence of 25 years for the robbery, and 10 for the firearms charge. The sentence was later reduced to 7 years by a judicial review, conducted after Judge Carter had died. However, an appeal to the Supreme Court was declined, and Patty was incarcerated in the Federal Correctional Institute in Pleasanton, California. In a second trial on the charges involved in the incident at the sporting goods store, she was given 5 years probation. Exploitation filmmakers, and publishers, wasted no time in cashing in on the Hearst case. The first was Joseph Zito's Abduction, 1975, which was based on the adult novel Black Abductor, a bizarre case of art imitating life imitating art, since it's widely believed that the slaw got the idea for Patty's abduction from the novel, which came out a year beforehand. Zito wasn't the only one to tune into the sleazier implications of the Hearst affair. Robert L. Roberts' Patty, 1975, was a porno account of the case, with plentiful hardcore scenes viewed in flashback as the events are discussed and analyzed by psychiatrists. Abduction of Patty was a popular porn loop of torture and rape from corporal films, while one edition of the notorious underground sex magazine Finger boasted a machine gun holding, pubic hair flashing Patty clone on the cover under the headline "Cunt Washed by the Slaw." Last came Nate Rogers' Tanya, Sex Queen of the Slaw, 1976, which featured non-stop softcore sex including much nudity, lesbian, and interracial scenes. 6. Patty ended up serving a total of only 21 months, before President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence in 1979, laying down tough terms of parole which she was to strictly adhere to. Hearst, by this stage married to her former bodyguard Bernard Shaw, was now seemingly well out of the grip of the slaw, and aggressively claiming that she had been the victim of brainwashing and coercion, applied to each successive president for a full pardon, which was finally granted by Bill Clinton in January of 2001, one has to wonder if her recurring bit parts in the films of John Waters were a hindrance or a help. 3. Postscript. The kidnapping of Patty Hearst seemed to have been relegated to the confines of 1970s history, an event forever married to that decade, and long overshadowed by more brutal celebrity crimes. That was until June 1999, when the case came screaming into the new millennium. In St. Paul, Minnesota, Sarah Jane Olson was arrested and charged with being Kathleen Ann Solia. For 24 years, Solia had kept up an impressive facade of being a devoted family woman, the wife of a respected doctor who read to the blind and attended church every Sunday. Initially, she fiercely denied the charge, accusing the FBI of making a serious mistake. Her family and friends rallied around her, raising the $1 million bail that had been slapped on her. Slowly, however, Solia's will to keep up her pretense was broken down, and she eventually admitted that she had once been part of the SLA. Solia became involved with the SLA after forming a friendship with member Angela Atwood. The two had met through their involvement in a local theater group. Although initially looked upon as being too weak-willed by other members of the SLA, Solia's allegiance hardened after the Safe House gun battle, in which Atwood was one of those killed. A speech which Solia gave at a Berkeley rally was filmed by undercover police, and would be crucial in identifying her more than 20 years later. In retaliation for the Safe House tragedy, Solia was believed to have been responsible for planting 2 pipe bombs loaded with nails into the exhaust pipes of 2 LA patrol cars. Although the bombs failed to detonate, they had clearly been designed to kill, and when a hardware store owner identified Solia as the customer who purchased the materials used for making the bombs, her 20-plus years of deception had begun, and she was wanted on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. Solia was eventually arrested following a tip-off which the FBI received after a story about her aired on the May 15, 1999 episode of America's Most Wanted. At the resulting trial, Kathleen Solia/Sarah Jane Olson, her name had been legally changed not long after she disappeared, was sentenced to 20 years after being found guilty of the attempted car bombings in 1975. 4 Revolutionary Screeds. Screed 1, The Coming of the Cobra. The emblem of the Symbionese Liberation Army is 170,000 years old, and it is one of the first symbols used by people to signify God and life. The 2 bottom heads on each side of the cobra represent the 4 principles of life: the sun, the moon, the earth, and the water. The 3 center heads represent God and the universe, and are called the Godhead. The number 7 as embracing all the universal forces of God and life can be traced to the Egyptian temples and their 7 pillars, to the 7 candles of the pre-Zionist, North African religions, to the Buddhist and Hindu religions, and to the North and South American Indian religions. This is because the 7 principles explain the interrelationships of life, of the family and the state, of the human anatomy and the universe. And because the basic principle behind any kind of union and series of relationships must be equally accessible to all concerned, we see why the 7 heads of the cobra have but one body. The thoughts and purpose in each of the 7 heads of the cobra penetrates its common body and soul, and from this we see how the source of the cobra's survival lies not in any individual head, but rather in the relationship and unity of all the heads to each other. The Symbionese Liberation Army has selected the 7-headed cobra as our emblem because we realize that an army is a mass that needs unity in order to become a fighting force, and we know that true unity among people must be based upon a concern that is universal. It is a revolutionary unity of all people against a common oppressor enemy of the people. This unity of 7 heads in one body defines the essence of cooperation and socialism in the great undertaking of revolutionary war. Through the Puritan capitalist ethics of competition, individualism, fascism, racism, sexism, and imperialism, the enemy is attacking us. This enemy functions by means of attacking one race or group among us in an attempt to force us into submission and division and isolation from each other. From these attacks, we have learned that our common enemy will not stop until we come together to stop him, for he lives off the murder and oppression of our divided and therefore defenseless people. We have chosen the 7-headed cobra as the emblem of the SLA because our forces are from every walk of life, from every religion, and of every race, and by our unity does our strength and our common goal for freedom from the chains of capitalism make true the meaning of our 7 principles of unity. Our military and political strength arises from the masses of all our people, for when the people are at one in their inmost body, they shatter even the hardest of iron or of bronze, and when the people understand each other in their inmost heart, their words are sweet and strong. The 7 memberships of our federation are men and women who are black, brown, yellow, red, white, young and old. Each of these members joins together and speaks and fights for the best interests of all within the body, just as one head of the cobra cannot be attacked without the others rising to strike with venom in self-defense to destroy the attacker. Each head of the cobra stands in organic need of all the others in order to maintain its survival. From this example of the necessity of unity in order to survive, the SLA will build and fight for the socialist unity of all oppressed peoples. A cry from any one of us will echo in the body of our common ear, and we will attack out of instinct, and in self-defense, for our survival. And with the venom of our 7 heads we will destroy the fascist insect who preys upon the life of the people, and with the minds of our 7 heads, and the spirit of our one body and soul, we will secure a future for our children. Screed 3, the Slaw Oath. To those who would bear the hopes and future of our people, let the voice of their guns express the words of freedom. 1. Umoja, La Unidad, unity. To strive for and maintain unity in our household, our nation, and in the Symbionese Federation. 2. Cujacagulia, La Libre Determination, self-determination. To define ourselves, name ourselves, speak for ourselves and govern ourselves. 3. Ujima, Trabajo Colectivo y Responsabilidad. Collective work and responsibility to build and maintain our nation and the Federation together by making our brothers and sisters and the Federation's problems our problems and solving them together. 4. Ujama, Producción Cooperativa, cooperative production. To build and maintain our own economy from our skills and labor and resources and to ensure ourselves and other nations that we all profit equally from our labor. 5. Nia, Propósito, purpose. To make as our collective vocation the development and liberation of our nation, and all oppressed people, in order to restore our people and all oppressed people to their traditional greatness and humanity. 6. Kumba, Creativo, creativity. To do all we can, as best we can, in order to free our nation and defend the Federation and constantly make it and the earth that we all share more beautiful and beneficial. 7. Imani, faith. To believe in our unity, our leaders, our teachers, our people, and in the righteousness and victory of our struggle and the struggle of all oppressed and exploited people. Screed 4, Constitution and Program. The Symbionese Federation and the SLA. Declaration of Revolutionary War and the Symbionese Program, August 21, 1973. The Symbionese Federation and the Symbionese Liberation Army is a united and federated grouping of members of different races and people and socialistic political parties of the oppressed people of the fascist United States of America, who have under black and minority leadership formed and joined the Symbionese Federated Republic and have agreed to struggle together in behalf of all their people and races and political parties' interest in the gaining of freedom and self-determination and independence for all their people and races. The Symbionese Federation is not a government, but rather it is a united and federated formation of members of different races and people and political parties who have agreed to struggle in a united front for the independence and self-determination of each of their races and people and the liquidation of the common enemy. And who by this federated formation represent their future and independent pre-governments and nations of their people and races. The Symbionese Federation is not a party, but rather it is a federation, for its members are made up of members of all political parties and organizations and races of all the most oppressed people of this fascist nation, thereby forming unity and the full representation of the interests of all the people. The Symbionese Liberation Army is an army of the people, and is made up of members of all the people. The SLA has no political power or political person over it that dictates who will fight and die if needed for the freedom of our people and children, but does not risk their life or fight too for our freedom, but rather the SLA is both political and military in that in the SLA the army officer, whether female or male, is also the political officer, and they both are the daughters and sons of the people, and they both fight as well as speak for the freedom of our people and children. The Symbionese Federation and the Symbionese Liberation Army is made up of the aged, youth, and women and men of all races and people. The name symbionese is taken from the word symbiosis, and we define its meaning as a body of dissimilar bodies and organisms living in deep and loving harmony and partnership in the best interest of all within the body. We of the Symbionese Federation and the SLA define ourselves by this name because it states that we are no longer willing to allow the enemy of all our people and children to murder, oppress, and exploit us, nor define us by color and thereby maintain division among us, but rather have joined together under black and minority leadership in behalf of all our different races and people to build a better and new world for our children and people's future. We are a united front and federated coalition of members from the Asian, Black, Brown, Indian, White, Women, Gray and Gay liberation movements, who have all come to see and understand that only if we unite and build our new world and future, will there really be a future for our children and people. We of the people and not the ruling capitalist class, will build a new world and system, where there is really freedom and a true meaning to justice and equality for all women and men of all races and people, and an end to the murder and oppression, exploitation of all people. We of the Symbionese Federation and the SLA are the children of all oppressed people, who have decided to redefine ourselves as a Symbionese race and people. Yet, recognizing the rich cultures of each and enforcing our right to existence of our many cultures within a united federation of independent and sovereign nations, each of them flourishing and protected by its own laws and codes of self-determination. We are of many colors, but yet of one mind, for we all in history's time on this earth have become part of each other in suffering and in mind, and have agreed that the murder, oppression, and exploitation of our children and people must end now, for we have all seen the murder, oppression, and exploitation of our people for too long under the hand of the same enemy and class of people and under the same system. Knowing this, the Symbionese Federation and the SLA know that our often murderous alienation from each other aids and is one of the fundamental strengths behind the capitalist class's ability to murder and oppress us all. By not allowing them to define us by color, and also recognizing that by refusing ourselves to also internalize this false division definition, knowing that in mind and body we are facing the same enemy and that we are all comrades of one people, the murdered and oppressed. We are now able to become a united people under the Symbionese Federation and make true the words of our codes of unity that to die a race, and be born a nation, is to become free. Therefore, we of the Symbionese Federation and the SLA do not under the rights of human beings submit to the murder, oppression, and exploitation of our children and people, and do under the rights granted to the people under the Declaration of Independence of the United States, do now by the rights of our children and people and by force of arms and with every drop of our blood, declare revolutionary war against the fascist capitalist class, and all their agents of murder, oppression and exploitation. We support by force of arms the just struggle of all oppressed people for self-determination and independence within the United States and the world. And hereby offer to all liberation movements, revolutionary workers' groups, and people's organizations our total aid and support for the struggle for freedom and justice for all people and races. We call upon all revolutionary black and other oppressed people within the fascist United States to come together and join the Symbionese Federation and fight in the forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army. Screed 5, Goals of the SLA. 1. To unite all oppressed people into a fighting force and to destroy the system of the capitalist state and all its value systems. To create in its place a system of sovereign nations that are in the total interest of all its races and people, based on the true affirmation of life, love, trust, and honesty, freedom and equality that is truly for all. 2. To assure the rights of all people to self-determination and the rights to build their own nation and government, with representatives that have shown through their actions to be in the interest of their people. To give the right to all people to select and elect their own representatives and governments by direct vote. 3. To build a People's Federated Council, who will be a male and female of each People's Council or sovereign nation of the Symbionese Federation of Nations, who shall be the representatives of their nations in the forming of trade pacts and unified defense against any external enemy that may attack any of the free nations of the Federation and to form other aids to each other's needs. 4. To aid and defend the cultural rights of all the sovereign nations of the Symbionese Federation, and to aid each nation in the building of educational and other institutions to meet and serve this need for its people. 5. To place the control of all the institutions and industries of each nation into the hands of its people. To aid sovereign nations of the Federation to build nations where work contributes concretely to the full interest and needs of its workers and the communal interest of its communities and its people and the mutual interest of all within the Federation of Nations. 6. To aid and defend the rights of all oppressed people to build nations which do not institute oppression and exploitation, but rather does institute the environment of freedom and defends that freedom on all levels and for all of the people, and by any means necessary. 7. To give back to all people their human and constitutional rights, liberty, equality, and justice and the right to bear arms in the defense of these rights. 8. To create a system where our aged are cared for with respect, love, and kindness and aided and encouraged to become assets in their own ways to their nations and to their communal community. That the life that moves around them is not a frightening and murderous one and where life is not a fear, but rather one of love and feeling and of unity. 9. To create a system and laws that will neither force people into nor force them to stay in personal relationships that they do not wish to be in, and to destroy all chains instituted by legal and social laws of the capitalist state which acts as a reinforcing system to maintain this form of imprisonment. 10. To create institutions that will aid, reinforce, and educate the growth of our comrade women and aid them in making a new true and better role to live in life and in the defining of themselves as a new and free people. 11. To create new forms of life and relationships that bring true meanings of love to people's relationships, and to form communes on the community level and bring the children of the community into being the responsibility of the community, to place our children in the union of real comradeship and in the care and loving interest of the revolutionary community. 12. To destroy the prison system, which the capitalist state has used to imprison the oppressed and exploited, and thereby destroy the love, unity, and hopes of millions of lives and families. And to create in its place a system of comradeship and that of group unity and education on a communal and revolutionary level within the community, to bring home our daughters and sons and sisters and brothers, fathers and mothers, and welcome them home with love and a new revolutionary comradeship of unity. 13. To take control of all state land and that of the capitalist class and to give back the land to the people. To form laws and codes that safeguard that no person can own the land, or sell the land, but rather the nation's people own the land and use it for their needs and interest to live. No one can own or sell the air, the sky, the water, the trees, the birds, the sun, for all of this world belongs to the people of this earth. 14. To take control of all buildings and apartment buildings of the capitalist class and fascist government and to totally destroy the rent system of exploitation. 5. To build a federation of nations, who shall formulate programs and unions of actions and interests that will destroy the capitalist value system and its other anti-human institutions and who will be able to do this by meeting all the basic needs of all of the people and their nations. For they will be all able to do this because each nation will have full control of all of its industries and institutions and does not run them for profit, but in the full interest of all the people of its nation. 16. To destroy all forms and institutions of racism, sexism, ageism, capitalism, fascism, individualism, possessiveness, competitiveness, and all other such institutions that have made and sustained capitalism and the capitalist class system that has oppressed and exploited all of the people of our history. By this means and the mutual aid and unity of each nation within the Symbionese Federation, will each nation be able to provide to each person and couple and family free of cost the 5 basic needs of life, which are food, healthcare, housing, education, and clothing, and in this way allowing people to be able to find and form new values and new systems of relationships and interests based on a new meaning to life and love. If the quest for freedom is death, then by the death of the enemy will black and other oppressed people find and regain their freedom. Screed 7, War Council Alliance. The United Symbionese War Council terms of military/political alliance. Our commitment to the revolutionary struggle for self-determination for all oppressed people and races and the international proletarian revolution is total and fully uncompromisable. Therefore, any relationship the Symbionese War Council has with any group or organization is based on their active military/political commitment to the goal of gaining freedom for all oppressed people and races. 1. Our alliance with any group or organization is based upon their firm decision to fight as well as talk in behalf of the people's interest, and once this commitment is clear, then we can come together in order to collectively develop a common strategy. 2. Work together to develop tactical coordination. 3. Assist each other in developing the abilities and talents of all the members of the Symbionese War Council and to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of the leadership in order to constantly better all aspects of the ability and actions of the War Council, and its individual leadership from other organizations. 2. Command positions of the War Council are subject to the approval of all members of the Council, based upon the military/political thinking and ability of the presented officer to work with others in the interest of freedom for all people and races. 3. Command positions in the War Council are not appointed by whom one knows, one's sex, one's color or the group or organization one belongs to, but only by one's courage, determination, intelligence, aggressive initiative and capability as a leader, and one's military/political thinking. 4. All members of the War Council are expected and fully are responsible for the military-political leadership of the SLA. They must fight and speak for the people, and this must be understood clearly by all members. 5. No member of the War Council can elect or select himself or herself to a position such as the head of a government or people's council. The War Council is totally an alliance of war against the common enemy. The people themselves shall have and hold the only right to select and elect their governments and government heads of state. 6. It is not the policy of the War Council to rip off, i.e., steal leadership or membership from other organizations, but rather it is the policy of the War Council to aid and support the development and education of leadership to fulfill truly its responsibility to the people, and to allow the collective intelligence, leadership, and resourcefulness of the leadership from different organizations and groups to flourish together and grow together, thereby forming an area where the collective interests and needs as well as weaknesses and strengths of each can benefit each in the common struggle to liquidate the common enemy. 7. A successful military force is a necessity for actualizing political goals and must therefore be held as a priority. Therefore, the true assistance in the supplying of military equipment, materials, finances, personnel, i.e., personnel is of the utmost importance. Once these forces have fully committed themselves to open and total warfare against the common enemy, and members of the War Council must understand this clearly. 8. Leadership of any group or organization who is truly committed and in agreement with the goals of the SLA and the terms of military/political alliance may be presented to the War Council. However, the presented officer's membership is not confirmed until it is verified that prior to presentation for membership a combat action has been taken part in by that group or organization within the last 12 months. 9. Once the War Council collectively agrees to an action or plan of strategy, then that action shall be understood as an action of the SLA, and not of any single group or organization. Just as the fingers cannot call themselves a fist, and the fist cannot call itself the fingers. From time to time the membership on the War Council may disagree upon a particular action or strategy. When in disagreement, that particular membership need not participate in the SLA action, but membership on the War Council is maintained only as long as all commitments made to the collective Symbionese War Council are continued to be fully adhered to. It is the disagreeing group or organization's responsibility to, on its own, prove out their ideas in order to change or modify its own or the collective War Council's direction. 10. It is the policy of the War Council not to involve itself in the internal political affairs or disagreements that may result within different organizations or groups. However, the War Council recognizes and accepts membership to the Council of any military/political unit, cell, or organization that qualifies and shall recognize them as true representatives of that particular organization or group. It is the collective policy of the War Council that the failure of the elected leadership to take her or his revolutionary responsibility as far as the War Council is concerned shall be totally the responsibility of the elected leader and not that of the War Council. 11 Organizations or groups that wish to serve in combat units must select 2 persons, 1 female and 1 male, if possibly, who have full responsibility and authority to act and represent their group or organization and who will hold a command position in the unified command of the United Symbionese War Council. 12 All members of the Symbionese War Council must clearly understand that our commitment is total and our goal is the total freedom of the people and children and the destroying totally of the common enemy. Therefore, it is held that any restraining of supplies or other war materials etc. for political reasons or reactionary reasons or political chess games with the enemy, by any officer or other persons in the War Council, that by its actions endangers the lives of the women and men of the Symbionese Liberation Army shall be held as a full and total violation of this alliance pact and compromising with the enemy and the freedom and life of the people and children and therefore is punishable by death. To those who would bear the hopes and future of the people, let the voice of their guns express the words of freedom. Screed 7, SLA. Tactical Support Units. Each cell of the SLA Tactical Support Units is composed of elements of other organizations and groups and individuals under the strategy of the SLA. It is totally impossible to follow the egotistic aspirations of many leaders of political organizations, since they continue to organize new organizations every time one falls apart, when they fail to understand that the people always organize to fight the enemy, and when leaders fail to start the fight, then the people fall from that organization. To continue in this manner is totally reactionary, egotistic, opportunist and anti-revolutionary, since to do so only allows for the continued grouping and regrouping of the same revolutionary people for the fight that never comes and with the only purpose of organizing. This is totally anti-revolutionary, for within the true purpose of revolution there are only 2 deep purposes, to destroy the enemy and free the people. This in itself means the need for an army of the people that fights the enemy. In order to organize, one must organize in support of something. One does not organize in support of having or belonging to or just to organize, but rather one must have a purpose to organize around, and since in revolution it is the purpose to organize to fight the enemy and to support those that fight on the front lines, it is then clear that the people organize to fight and destroy the enemy. They do not organize to fight the enemy and then when it comes time to fight, claim that to fight the enemy will endanger the organization, for this would show them to be lovers of positions and the organization and not true revolutionaries that love the people and children. Since you as members of the people have organized to fight the enemy, for the reason that you are and do love the people, then it is clear to you where your true responsibility is, and that is to join and support those who are in the front lines fighting the enemy of us all, regardless of what color, group, or organization they belong to. For the people are just this, they are not an organization or color or group, they are the oppressed, the exploited, and the murdered, they are those we love. And for whom we, if needed, are willing to die for, they are our children. Therefore what is needed now is for you as lovers of the people to select in what area you are able and willing to fight in or give support to, either in the combat units or support units of the SLA, the choice is yours alone, to be and show yourselves as lovers of the people and our children and true to your word revolutionaries, or as egotistic opportunists and lovers of the group and organization and enemies of the people. Screed 11, Patricia Hearst Arrest Order. Symbionese Liberation Army. Western Regional Adult Unit. Communique No. 3. February 4, 1974. Subject, Prisoners of War. Target, Patricia Campbell Hearst, daughter of Randolph A. Hearst, corporate enemy of the people. Warrant order, arrest and protective custody, and if resistance, execution. Warrant issued by the Court of the People. On the aforestated date, combat elements of the United Federated Forces of the Symbionese Liberation Army armed with cyanide-loaded weapons served an arrest warrant upon Patricia Campbell Hurst. It is the order of this court that the subject be arrested by combat units and removed to a protective area of safety, and only upon completion of this condition to notify Unit Number 4 to give communication of this action. It is the directive of this court that during this action only, no civilian elements be harmed if possible, and that warning shots be given. However, if any citizens attempt to aid the authorities or interfere with the implementation of this order, they shall be executed immediately. This court hereby notifies the public and directs all combat units in the future to shoot to kill any civilian who attempts to witness or interfere with any operation conducted by the People's Forces against the fascist state. Should any attempt be made by authorities to rescue the prisoner, or to arrest or harm any SLA elements, the prisoner is to be executed. The prisoner is to be maintained in adequate physical and mental condition, and unharmed as long as these conditions are adhered to. Protective custody shall be composed of combat and medical units, to safeguard both the prisoner and her health. All communications from this court must be published in full, in all newspapers, and all other forms of the media. Failure to do so will endanger the safety of the prisoner. Further communications will follow. SLA. Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people. Screed 23, Symbionese Codes of War. Codes of War of the United Symbionese Liberation Army. Penalty by death. All charges that face a death penalty shall be presented to a jury trial made up of the members of the guerrilla forces. The jury shall be selected by the charged, and the judge conducting the trial shall be selected by the charged also. The charged shall select his or her defense, and the trial judge shall select the prosecutor. The jury shall number at least 3/4 ths of the remaining members of the cells, and the verdict must be unanimous. 1. The surrender to the enemy. 2. The killing of a comrade or disobeying orders that result in the death of a comrade. 3. The deserting of a comrade on the field of war. 3a. Leaving a team position, thereby not covering a comrade. 3b. Leaving a wounded comrade. 4. The informing to the enemy or spying against the people or guerrillas. 5. Leaving a cell unit or base camp without orders. Any comrade may leave the guerrilla forces if she or he feels that they no longer feel the courage or faith in the people and the struggle that we wage. A comrade, however, must follow the codes of war in doing this, that is, he or she must inform the commanding guerrilla of their wish to go from guerrilla force. Thereupon, the guerrilla in command will release them in a safe area. The ex-combatants may only leave with his or her personal sidearm. Remember, this is the only way a comrade may leave the SLA, any other way is deserting, punishable by death. 6. All paid or unpaid informants operating within the community against the people and the guerrilla forces are sentenced without trial to immediate death. Penalty by disciplinary action. Disciplinary action should be primarily to aid the collective growth of the cell, so that through positive action the mistake is understood. All charges that face disciplinary action shall be under the full control of the guerrilla in command, and she or he shall weigh all evidence and shall decide the verdict, and if needed, direct the disciplinary action to be taken by the charged comrade necessary to direct him or her. Examples of disciplinary action are the cleaning and maintenance of all cell arms, ammunition, and explosives for 1 week, the upkeep of outhouses, the full suspension of wine and cigarettes, and extra duties such as additional watches, practice and study periods, correspondence, filing, typing, washing, cleaning, cooking, and physical exercises. 1. Lack of responsibility and determined decisiveness in following orders. 2. Nonvigilance or the leaving of an assigned post without orders. 3. Lack of responsibility in maintaining equipment or proficiency in all guerrilla skills, especially shooting. 4. The use of any unmedically prescribed drug. This rule relates to the use of such drugs as heroin, speed, peyote, mescaline, reds, pep pills, whites, yellow jackets, bennies, dexies, goofballs, LSD, and any other kind of hallucinatory drugs. However, permission is granted for the use of only two types of relaxing drugs, these are marijuana, and/or beer and wine and other alcohol. This permission is only granted when approved by the guerrilla in command, and with very restraining use only. No officer may grant the use of any of these said drugs to the full number of forces under his or her command. If this permission is granted, only half the force will be allowed to take part, while the other half will stand guard duty. The past has shown once true revolutionaries have seriously undertaken revolutionary arms struggle. Marijuana and alcohol are not used for recreational purposes or to dilute or blur the consciousness of reality, but very small amounts for medicinal purposes to calm nerves under times of tension, not to distort reality. 5. The failure to sever all past contacts or failing to destroy all evidence of identification or association. 6. Killing of an unarmed enemy. In this instance the enemy refers to members of USA rank and file only and not to any members of the CIA, FBI, or other special agents or any political police state agents. Members of the USA military rank and file are to be accorded this distinction because we recognize that many of them have been forced into membership either directly, through the draft, or indirectly due to economic pressures. 7. Tortures or sexual assault on either a comrade or people of the enemy. 8. Criminal acts against the poor, comrades or guerrilla forces. 9. Malicious cursing or any kind of disrespect to those in command, a comrade, or the people. 10. Deceiving or lying to fellow comrades or the people. If any of these acts are committed on a continuous basis, the charged comrade shall become a prisoner of the cell and shall remain in this prisoner's status until such time as she or he is able to prove their renewed commitment to revolutionary discipline and revolutionary principles, or the charged may request to be dishonorably discharged. Conduct of guerrilla forces towards the enemy soldiers and prisoners. 1. Prisoners of war shall be held under the international codes of war, they shall be provided with adequate food, medical aid, and exercises. 2. All USA military rank and file forces shall be allowed to surrender upon our conditions of surrender, and thereupon they shall be carefully searched and interrogated. All prisoners are to receive instruction on the goals of Symbionese Liberation Army, then released in a safe area. 3. All weapons, medical, and food supplies, maps, military equipment and money are to be confiscated and turned into the guerrilla in charge. 4. Under no conditions shall any rank and file enemy soldier be relieved of his or her personal property. All guerrilla forces shall conduct themselves in a manner of respect toward the people, and shall, when able and safe to do so, provide food and other aid to the people. They shall, when possible, inform the people of the goals of the United Symbionese Federation and encourage other women and men to join our forces and to serve the people in fight for freedom. All comrades have one main responsibility, that is to struggle and win and stand together, so no comrade stands alone, all must look out for each other, all must aid the other black, brown, red, yellow, white, man or woman, all or none. This document may change from time to time, so officers are requested to follow the changes with discipline. To those who would bear the hopes and future of the people, let the voice of their guns express the word of freedom. Alpha Screed, Structural Plan for the SLA. Mobility Unit. It is the responsibility of the Mobility Unit to provide for the movement of supplies and military personnel and the necessary equipment needed to safely move said personnel and supplies. It is responsible for the safe movement of supplies between other units and to and from the combat units, and providing needed hiding places and disguises necessary in the movement of combat elements and supplies and equipment. It is also responsible for receiving and decentralized stocking of those supplies and equipment under its authority and which combat forces have found to be in excess of their supplies after expropriation operations. The building of hideouts that will serve from time to time the needs of combat units in operations in different areas of the state and other states as actions allow. The acquiring, building and camouflaging of vans, buses, and other means to allow safe movement of supplies and personnel. Arming and armor plating of said type autos and the building of means of concealment for supplies and personnel, to also build defense systems into said autos, such as oil, smoke, and nail release systems. maintaining of autos in top condition and giving them top speed and drivability at the same time, bulletproof and tires, etc. Acquiring, decentralized stocking and receiving and providing of phony and real ID papers, uniforms of movement, such as disguises for mailman, priest, gasman, policeman, nun, army, navy, air force, wigs, shoes, and typeset equipment, parts to repair autos, gas and oil facilities, tires, and power generating equipment for tools. Medical unit. It is the responsibility of the medical unit to provide medical combat personnel when combat units open operations in any area of the state. To provide needed medical care that elements of our forces may need from time to time, and to decentralize stocking of medical supplies and equipment under its authority and that may be sent from forward combat troops after expropriation operations against the enemy. It is the medical unit's responsibility to build and find means to safely hide medical equipment. It is the responsibility of the medical unit to build and provide underground operating rooms and the needed personnel and equipment to run them in all and different areas of the state, both in urban and rural areas. The building of recuperation areas that are security sound. The building of mobile medical teams that are able to be within a 15-mile area from force units in its operations, thereby allowing combat elements aid as soon as possible under war conditions. The building of training facility for medical combat training, warfare, and its medical needs call for military medical training in the areas of gunshot wounds, cuts, shock, gas burns, poison, etc. and should be held as the main training priority. Acquiring of generating power equipment for operating rooms and medical equipment. The acquiring, receiving, and decentralized stockpiling of medical supplies and equipment across the state in safe and underground areas with only a few security-cleared personnel knowing the whereabouts of said supplies. Armament unit. It is the responsibility of the armament unit to provide, stock, build and repair military equipment and to develop new revolutionary weapons. To provide decentralized stocking and hiding areas for weapons and ammo and other type equipment, and supply combat elements with supplies when needed. To build booby traps, bulletproofing, and mines, electric shotgun mines, etc. To build facilities for the making of machine guns, reloading equipment, cyanide bombs and bullets, poison and arms to fire them with. Acquiring or building ammo, gas masks, sniper rifles, silencers, mortars, anti-tank weapons, flamethrowers, and explosives. To work with others in the use of the people and the people's creativity to find new means and ways to destroy the enemy better than he can destroy us. Provision unit. It is the responsibility of the provision unit to provide food and other such supplies as are under its authority to those units that request it, to see to it that the needs of the medical unit are met and that of other units. To form and develop hiding places and underground areas where food and other provisions can be safely stored. Stocking of canned foods and other foods and acquiring of means to maintain the food value of these foods. Decentralized stocking across the state of foods, cooking fuels, equipment for cooking, soap and other equipment necessary. Communication unit. It is the responsibility of the communication unit to see to it and provide all combat support groups, support units, and command sections with communication equipment, to repair said and build it 9's own equipment if possible, to train personnel in the use of radio and type equipment and to provide trained personnel to combat units and command sections. To build and maintain jamming and monitoring equipment and personnel to jam and monitor enemy communications. To build with other units, communication lines between other units, by clear and approved security means, to form teams of communications runners, made up of dogs, birds, women, children, old comrade people, etc., to form areas to aid units in forming dead drops and end cuts for security. To maintain, acquire, and receive equipment that has been expropriated by combat units from the enemy, and supply said equipment when needed to other units. To stock by decentralized means across the state these supplies and to also build and set up communication teams across the state with both long and short range radio equipment, thereby giving them the ability to keep all of our units in full contact with each at all times. Intelligence unit. It is the responsibility of the intelligence unit to build and provide means whereby the enemy is always 2 steps behind us, but never in front of us. It must maintain a ever-flowing line of information on the enemy, informers, and supplies that our forces may need. It must intake intelligence and find out clearly the truth of it and pass it on to command sections as soon as possible. It must not overlook any action of the enemy or those who are near the enemy. It must maintain running files and run photo teams to be able to supply the unit and central command with all possible information on the enemy or buildings and terrain that may be needed in carrying out of operations. Building of files on known informers and agents, addresses, family, photo if possible, car color and license number. The forming of information on the movements of police, agents, prison officers, and family, photos if possible. Formulating information on movement of money, military equipment, medical supplies, food supplies, arms, explosives, radio equipment, gas and oil and other type supplies. Acquiring of maps of government institutions, jails, prisons, banks, storm drains, communication stations and lines, power plants and lines, oil and gas and other fuel supply tanks areas, airports, Navy, Army base area and explosive and arms makers locations and security that is used for all these type buildings and areas. Information on movements of police and other military elements, placing of SLA agents in police and military institutions. Forming of counterintelligence agent teams and the forming of means to carry out security checks of SLA personnel. Propaganda unit. It is the responsibility of the propaganda unit to maintain clandestine press and printing equipment, mimeograph equipment, or other type means to provide newspapers, pamphlets, flyers and stamps for propaganda and agitation against the enemy and to allow the people to know both our victories and our failures, to provide the people with truthful information on its oppression and the need for them to fight against the common enemy as one people. The incorporation of members of the people for the purpose of working in propaganda actions in their community, to train them in the use of walls, tape recordings, loudspeakers, drawings, and other forms of propaganda. To provide propaganda to the actions of combat units against the enemy, to seek to turn enemy soldiers against their officers, to seek to keep unity among our people, while the enemy is trying to divide us. To use radio and other means to bring forth a war of nerves against the enemy, and to give the spirit of struggle to all our people. To by letters sent to government officers attempt to turn them to our side and explaining the meaning of our armed forces' actions and that their only hope is to take the side that will win in the end, the people. The misinforming, spreading lies and forming of uncertainty in the enemy's forces and personnel in local areas, announcing of false information to the enemy, using rumors, information on corruption of government members and all possible means to bring about a war of nerves upon the enemy. Screed 31, Tanya Hurst. Greetings to the people. This is Tanya. On April 15, my comrades and I expropriated $10,660.02 from the Sunset branch of the Hibernia Bank. Casualties could have been avoided had the persons involved kept out of the way, and cooperated with the people's forces until after our departure. I was positioned so that I could hold down customers and bank personnel who were on the floor. My gun was loaded, and at no time did any of my comrades intentionally point their guns at me. Careful examination of the photographs which were published clearly shows that this was true. Our action of April 15 forced the corporate fascist state to help finance the revolution. In the case of expropriation, the difference between a criminal act and a revolutionary act is shown by what the money is used for. As for the money involved in my parents' bad faith gesture to aid the people, these funds are being used to aid the people and to ensure the survival of the people's forces in their struggle with, and for, the people. To the clowns who want a personal interview with me, Vincent Hallinan, Stephen Weed, and the Pighursts, I prefer giving it to the people in the bank. It is absurd to think that I could surface to say what am I saying now, and still be allowed to freely return to my comrades. The enemy still wants me dead. I am obviously alive and well. As for being brainwashed, the idea is ridiculous to the point of being beyond belief. It is interesting the way earlier reports characterized me as a beautiful, intelligent liberal, while in more recent reports I am a common girl who has been brainwashed. The contradictions are obvious. Consciousness is terrifying to the ruling class, and they will do anything to discredit people who have realized that the only alternative to freedom is death, and that the only way we can free ourselves of this fascist dictatorship is by fighting, not with words but with guns. As for my ex-fiancé, I am amazed that he thinks that the first thing I would want to do, once freed, would be to rush and see him. I don't care if I never see him again. During the last few months, Stephen has shown himself to be a sexist, ageist pig. Not that this is a sudden change from the way he always was. It merely became more blatant during the period when I was still a hostage. Frankly, Stephen is the one who sounds brainwashed. I can't believe that those weird words were from his heart. They were a mixture of FBI rhetoric and randy simplicity. I have no proof that Mr. Debray's letter is authentic. The date and location he gave were confusing in terms of when the letter was published in the papers. How could it have been written in Paris and published in your newspapers on the same day, Adolf? In any case, I hope that the last action has put his mind at ease. If it did not, further actions will. To those people who still believe that I am brainwashed or dead, I see no reason to further defend my position. I am a good soldier in the People's Army. Patria Omuerd. Vence Ramos.